You're listening to a podcast by the Perennial Leader Project. Something I've always found strange is that we don't always see clearly. For example, many of you are aware that philosophical and spiritual traditions universally point to an interconnectedness that exists within the world. Yet, so many of us can feel disconnected. We can be in a crowded room and experience loneliness. So for today's episode, I want to revisit a topic that we discussed in our course, Wisdom is the Way, and it's titled The Wisdom of Connection. So we'll use that loosely as our guide. I'll put a link in the show notes so it's easy to find for you. But I want to talk about the art of connection. How do we come to see clearly? How do we come to experience belonging and connectedness? The French philosopher and historian Pierre Hadot observed that philosophy deepens and transforms habitual perception, forcing us to become aware that we perceive the world. We perceive the world through our subjective perception. And as we all know firsthand, our perceptions are not always accurate. So despite us maybe experiencing disconnection from time to time, doesn't actually mean that we are. The point I'd like to at least stress in this episode is seeing connection as something we build, a skill in a way, connected with wisdom. You could think of the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius writing in his Meditations. In a way, all things are interwoven, and therefore have a family feeling for each other. One thing follows another, in due order through the tension of movement, the common spirit inspiring them, and the unity of all beings. He advised himself to meditate often on the connection of all things. In many other passages, Marcus utilizes the wisdom of connection to act with kindness and virtue. Some of you might remember a well-known passage on dealing with difficult people in the beginning of Book 2, where he concluded, "None of them can harm me, nor can I become angry with someone who's related to me, because we are born to work together, like feet or hands or eyelids, like the rows of upper and lower teeth." Take a moment, if you would. Imagine the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, this powerful individual, lots of responsibility, later in life, someone who's been studying philosophy, searching for wisdom for many, many decades, sitting, writing in his journal things around connection, reminding himself not to get angry with someone who's related to him, reminding himself that we're born to work together. This is something that doesn't always come natural to us. It's something we have to build, just like any other habit, just like any other bit of wisdom. Although we are deeply interconnected, we generally need all sorts of reminders. Eternal truths are not exactly easy to see. It's possible for us to feel separate and isolated. If you live in the West, you have your own unique Social Security number. Yet, you only have a Social Security number because you are connected to a larger whole. If you were not, that number would instantly become meaningless. Another figure who's written extensively in his life on connection is the late Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh. He suggested that when we have enough time and we ask ourselves, "Who am I?" it points to all sorts of universal truths. In his classic book, Silence, Han wrote, "You may see that you're made of elements, like water, for example. If you remove the water from you, there's no you left. You're made of earth. If you remove the element earth from you, there's no you left. You're made of air. You need air desperately. Without air, you cannot survive. So if you remove the element of air from you, there's no you left." And go on and on. He used to say, holding up a piece of paper, that you can see the whole world in a single sheet of paper. Following this same example, if you think about everything that is needed to make a piece of paper, from the tree, from the earth to the air, everything. When we think of virtue, we naturally understand the need to cultivate our character through consistent practice. But the same is true for our perspectives. We must work through philosophical or spiritual exercises to cultivate wise ways of seeing the world. By doing so, we're better equipped to lead lives that are meaningful to ourselves and those around us. Longtime listeners of the show might remember previous episodes talking about cosmopolitanism or Hierocles circles. It's a visual that the Stoics use to better understand and practice the wisdom of connection. The objective is to draw further circles inward, treating our family as ourselves, our friends as our family, and so on until ultimately the entire human race. And again, there's a link in the show notes so you can see a visual. But you can imagine, if you haven't seen it before, these concentric circles. They'd keep building out, the smallest circle at the bottom being the self, the next circle, family, the next circle, fellow citizens, the next, countrymen, and then mankind as a whole. Here's how Hierocles put it. For in short, each of us, as it were, circumscribed by many circles, some which are less, but others larger, and some comprehend, but others are comprehended, according to the different and unequal habitudes with respect to each other. For the first, indeed, and most proximate circle is that which everyone describes his own mind as a center, in which circle the body, and whatever is assumed for the sake of the body are comprehended. For this is nearly the smallest circle. Here is how Hierocles described it. Quote, "For in short, each of us is, as it were, circumscribed by many circles, some of which are less, but others larger, and some comprehend, but others are comprehended, according to the different and unequal habitudes with respect to each other. For the first, indeed, and the most proximate circle is that which everyone describes his own mind as a center, in which circle the body, and whatever is assumed for the sake of the body are comprehended. For this is nearly the smallest circle, and almost touches the center itself. The second from this, which is at a greater distance from the center, but comprehends the first circle, is how parents, brothers, wife, and children are arranged." End quote. And Hierocles continues expanding that circle until it encompasses all of mankind. Now, we can probably all agree that the world would be a better place if everyone treated their fellow citizens like family. But it's also important to remember that what everyone does is not up to us. What's up to us is how we show up in the world, what philosophy of life we attempt to put into practice. It's worth contemplating whether or not we treat our fellow citizens like family. It's worth asking ourselves honestly and humbly how our life might change, how the world might change, this small circle that we live in, our community, might change if we treated everyone like family. Many of you have probably heard us discuss what's often called an epidemic of loneliness on the podcast. The wisdom of connection is not solely something to help us lead our lives. It is essential wisdom to help us all live in harmony together. Across the more than 200 interviews on In Search of Wisdom, several guests have raised concerns about loneliness. In his book Together, Vivek Murthy, the 21st Surgeon General, described loneliness this way. Loneliness is the subjective feeling that you're lacking the social connections you need. It can feel like being stranded, abandoned, or cut off from the people with whom you belong. Even if you're surrounded by other people, what's missing when you're lonely is the feeling of closeness, trust, and the affection of genuine friends, loved ones, and community. It seems to me that wisdom is an antidote to loneliness. It can bring us from loneliness to deep connection. We have lost or forgotten the wisdom of seeing ourselves as interconnected. I imagine, like myself, many of you did not learn about Hierocles circles or meditating often on interconnectedness in school. As legend has it, when Diogenes the Cynic was asked where he came from nearly 2 millennia ago, he responded with one word, cosmopolite, meaning a citizen of the world. The cosmopolitan view, which was held by the Cynics, Stoics, and many others, urges us to recognize all human beings as equal and unconditional worth, a worth grounded in moral choice capacity, rather than on traits that depend on fortuitous, natural, or social arrangements. In truth, we're all citizens of the world. Marcus Aurelius would use the analogy of a branch to stress the need to himself to remain connected. He wrote, "A branch cut from its neighboring branch is necessarily cut away from the whole tree. In the same way, a human being severed from just one other human has dropped from the whole community. Now the branch is cut off by someone else. But a man separates himself from his neighbor by his hatred or rejection, not realizing that he has thereby severed himself from the wider society of fellow citizens." It's important to remember that the art of connection is about including everyone in everything. As Nancy Sherman, a previous podcast guest, stressed in her book Stoic Wisdom, the roots of interconnectedness in Stoicism run just as deep as those of self-reliance. We have much to learn from the ancients and mistakes to avoid, says Sherman. Wisdom can help unite us to face our individual and our shared challenges, but only when empathy and mercy course through the veins of reason. Wisdom must be sought after. Even Marcus Aurelius had to embark on the search. He had to cultivate and meditate on the connection of all things. He worked diligently to expand his circles. Therefore, we are wise to do the same. If you enjoyed this meditation, I encourage you to subscribe to Perennial Meditations on Substack if you're not already a subscriber. There you'll find lots of meditations from this course, Wisdom is the Way, but also other courses like Perennial Habits and Happiness and the Meaning of Life. Until next time, be wise and be well.